Well, nature photographers, it's great to be back with you. It's Lee Hoy, and I'm coming to you with what I consider to be one of my most foundational and important videos. This topic that I'm going to address today is really the umbrella. It's the shelter under which all of my other videos, all the teaching I do in the field, everything under my mentorship program, it all culminates in this umbrella. And this umbrella is what I call my formula for nature photography success. So that you understand what I mean by nature photography, I love the genres of wildlife photography. So included in that is bird and flight, birds, mammals, macro. So, and I generally enjoy insects, reptiles, living organisms. I do some flower only. I'm not a big flower photographer per se. So that's my general interest in macro photography. Landscape photography, which I love, and generally what gets me most passionate are storms, big skies. I love deserts. I love big desert mountains. But I'll photograph landscapes in a lot of different areas. But I really love capturing big, dramatic skies. But I love landscape photography genre. Then we get to night sky, which again, I love shooting night sky. I have a hard time getting out to do it a lot because I really want to dedicate a lot of time when I do it, and I'm so busy traveling and working throughout the year that it can be a challenge, even though I live in the darkest skies in the lower 48 out here in the mountains of West Texas. Well, so those are the genres of nature photography that I enjoy. Now here is my formula for nature photography success, okay? Listen closely. Preparation plus skill times patience equals luck. Let me say that one more time. Preparation plus skill times patience equals luck. I'll be right back in a minute to expand on that and tell you what I mean. Howdy from West Texas. I'm Lee Hoy, professional nature photographer, and this is my YouTube channel, Lee Hoy Photography. I'm an OM System Ambassador, photography workshop instructor for Wildside Nature Tours and Precision Camera and Video, and contributing author for the Journal of Wildlife Photography. Well, let's break down this formula by first taking a look at the topic of preparation. Preparation entails all the things we can do before we ever head out in the field. This is the knowledge base. These are habits that we develop. These are considerations that become very important for us in day-to-day photography that we can do in our own home, in a library, in a vehicle, when we're out camping. Whatever it is we're doing before we get out in the field to photograph, that falls under the category of preparation. One simple example might be that to improve your macro photography, maybe you're going to read a book on insect behavior. There's a world of difference in field guides that teach you how to identify an organism, or like use an iNaturalist, and picking up material that teaches you how insects or mammals or reptiles or birds behave. Okay, so for example, in the insect world, some beetles, if you touch them, are going to play dead. And it can be a very long time before you might be able to get a realistic looking image if you've touched them. Birds, as we learn bird behavior, we learn that raptors often defecate before they take off. Or ducks will extend the neck before they burst into flight. So the more we can learn and prepare ourselves about animal behavior, the better we'll be at wildlife photography. For landscape photography, preparation can include things like this simple book, Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks Road Guide. We might start to learn about maybe hotspot landscape areas, or we might actually search for spots that not a lot of people photograph. Either way, we're preparing ourselves. Preparation could even include hiring a local guide who's much more knowledgeable about a destination than you are. So again, preparation is all about the knowledge we build. Maybe reading a book on light. This is a great book, Light, Science and Magic, right? We can do things before we ever leave home to prepare ourselves to be better landscape, wildlife, macro, night sky photographers. So in that, you might learn to anticipate your settings. How do you build that knowledge? I like to look out the windows and read light all day long. and might think, well, that's about this ISO, right? I might look at a bird and think, I wonder what shutter speed would be required to freeze that bird, because that shutter speed for a great blue heron, a peregrine falcon, and a swift are not necessarily the same thing. So that is preparation. The activities, the knowledge that you develop, all the things we can do at home before we ever get out in the field. I'll talk sometime about the practice of pre-visualization. Having a concept, an idea of images at a specific destination or with a particular subject that you have thought about, dreamt about, considered, contemplated before you ever get there. Now, don't allow yourself to get disappointed or upset if that doesn't occur, but that's a great practice of preparation. And there's all kinds of different things that we can do to prepare ourselves so that we're more effective once we get in the field. So that's the first part of our formula, preparation, and then plus skill. Now let's talk about the skill. Skill involves a big variety of categories, things that we really want to know. So for example, under skill, I break skill down into first equipment considerations. For example, if you're an OM system photographer, do you want to go with the prime 300 millimeter f4, or do you want to go with a 150 to 400 4.5 zoom? I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages to each. I own both. I shoot with this 99.9999999% of the time. I've hardly picked this lens up since I own this, but they're both outstanding lenses. Under equipment considerations, what's the proper care and use of a tripod? What about filters? I know we have built-in filters in OM system cameras, but do you need physical filters as well? So there's equipment considerations under skill, and I put equipment considerations under skill and not preparation, because knowing, understanding, mastering your gear, that is a skill. It's acquired over time, and it's not something we only do at home before we get out in the field. It is a combination of all these elements. So the first consideration under skill is equipment. The second consideration under skill are technical considerations. Should you shoot in RAW or JPEG? Do you understand how to interpret a histogram and using highlight alerts to help nail your exposure every single time? Do you know how to shoot at high ISOs? Have you mastered your system? And by that, I mean, can you take a camera body, put it behind your back, and if I ask you to change the shutter speed with one hand or the ISO with one hand, would you be able to do it? So technical considerations, should you shoot in manual mode versus shutter or aperture priority? There's a lot of different elements that go into the technical considerations of skills. So under skill, we now have equipment considerations. We now have technical considerations. Then the third category is creative considerations. Creative considerations are things like learning to read and chase natural light. Can you predict what is or what may occur with natural light? Do you know how to orient yourself for the light you want? What about shooting in horizontal or vertical format, or landscape and portrait format? How often do you shoot a vertical shot, or do you just always rely on cropping? Other creative considerations, how well do you know the general rules of composition and when you can and should break them? What about shooting in color or black and white? When does black and white better communicate what you hope to accomplish with an image than color? So those are creative considerations, and there are a plethora of creative considerations. Several of the articles that I've already written for the Journal of Wildlife Photography have addressed creative considerations. Now, the fourth consideration under skills is personal. This one may surprise you a little bit, okay? So we have under skills, let's review, equipment considerations, technical considerations, creative considerations, and now personal. One of the most important ones under the personal consideration is your passion. I can assure you that if you shoot what you are passionate about, you'll be a much better photographer. I see lots of great streetscape images. OM System is with live composite is outstanding at it. But on the flip side, I'm not really a big fan of cities. And when I'm in Austin visiting family or other big cities, I think, man, I could really capture. And then I think about, I got to deal with traffic. I might have to deal with weirdos. Do I really want to do that? So it's not really my passion. I have some nice shots like that, but it isn't my passion. Another personal consideration is be a lifelong learner. I will do a video about this. You know, one of the most depressing things I hear sometimes at photographic or bird oriented festivals, I'll have people come up and say, hey, when you do your workshops, do you do much teaching? And I'll say, well, yeah, of course. That's what I love. That's what I'm passionate about. And they'll go, and rarely, but occasionally, you know, well, we don't need any teaching. And I think you will never be a great photographer. You are useless and you are of no interest to me. So if you think you have nothing to learn, you're arrogant, a fool. I mean, even the Bible says that kind of person's a fool. And you're really short-sighted. That mindset is dull, boring, useless, lack of creativity, right? So other considerations under personal, you know, physical. I do man flow yoga. This is my yoga mat. I know you might try to picture me doing yoga, but it has radically changed my life. In fact, good news, I'm going to be interviewing the founder of Man Flow Yoga for an upcoming video because flexibility and strength are critical to being able to get in the proper position to capture outstanding images. And those that know me have seen a dramatic change when I do yoga versus when I don't. And a dramatic change, I'm also doing a strict carnivore diet. You know, I've lost almost 45 pounds since the end of July and really monitoring what I eat very closely. Well, many of my clients, they can't even kneel down. And I understand as we age, it gets more challenging. So what can you do for your physical health and your skills to help improve your photography? You know, developing patterns of photographic behavior, participating in a photography workshop. These are all personal considerations that you are going to want to incorporate. Also under that is truth in captioning. If you use AI to generate fake parts of your image, if you do sky replacement, for those of you that stick a hawk against a different sky, you're not doing it well. It stands out. And I'm hitting that one hard, aren't I? It's just, you're a loser if you hide that. If you lie about replacing a sky with a raptor, you're a loser, man. I'm going to hurt some feelings and I don't give a rat's ass. I don't care. That's pathetic. If you can't be honest about how you generated your image and you think you need to hide something, why? What is it? You know, I have no respect for that kind of photography. So those are the categories under skill. So we have preparation plus skill, and then this comes quite important. We're going to times that by patience. Now, when I say patience, most people think about just sitting in one spot. Okay, and that is indeed a part of being patient, anticipating that something may happen. But patience is also much more than just staying in one spot, because being patient doesn't mean you don't move around. Being patient means you might look at a subject that you really want to photograph, but you know where it's at right now is not a good spot. But if, based on its direction of travel, in 20 yards over to the right might be the best spot. Patience means you go over there and you wait for the great image instead of just trying to capture a image. I see so many people get excited and they get nervous and jittery and they go at the subject and they bump it and nobody gets a great image. Patience isn't just about sitting in one spot. Patience, and if you've been around me, I'm as passionate, excitable. I get moved to tears at times in the natural world, but I learned to control that so that I can focus and think about what's going to produce a visually compelling image. And that is patience. Learning to temper that excitement so my camera isn't shaking. Learning to temper the excitement so I can keep proper exposure technique in my mind. Containing that excitement so I can focus on creative considerations like composition, like the background, like light angles. So patience is so much more than staying in one spot. Most wildlife photographers that I see in the field, whether I know them or not, are not very patient. And patience is critical. In fact, let's take macro, night sky, landscape, and wildlife photography. If you think you need a lot of patience for wildlife photography, wait until you try macro with insects or venomous snakes or reptiles, amphibians. Macro photography, I think, is probably the genre that requires the most patience. Hence, I suspect that's why it's also one of the least done. Americans want it now, by God. We don't want, we want the McDonald's of a great image. We don't want to put in the time, the energy, the effort. We want it now. That's why some people generate fake crap with AI in their image. And I'm not talking about using AI to get rid of noise or sharpen an image. That's not creating something that wasn't there. But if you have just a landscape scene and you stick a moose in there with AI, you're not a photographer, you're a graphic illustrator. So I think that macro photography, if you really want to become better in the other genres of photography, macro will force you to do that. It is powerful. Leave all the other lenses. If you're going to go do macro, leave your landscape, leave your bird lens, focus on it. Put the time and effort in. I'm heading to Costa Rica here in just a couple of days, 5 days, I believe. And I'm going to scout for future macro workshops on the Osa Peninsula. And it's going to be phenomenal photography. So if you really want to master your system and master photography, invest your time into macro photography. Night sky requires tremendous patience. I see people that think they're going to get, 15 different locations in night sky photography. That's not a realistic assessment of what's going to happen. You might be able to move around at a couple of given locations, but if you're not patient, because you're working in the dark, right? So if you haven't mastered your system, you're going to be constantly flipping lights on and off, screwing up your night vision, screwing up images. You got to be patient. You got to look for that right button in the dark. I prefer working in the dark and complete dark and letting my night vision improve so that I can do things, but I also know my camera well enough to operate them in the dark. So night sky landscape requires patience, watching what the clouds may or may not do, reading the sky, reading shadows, reading foreground elements. That is patience, right? It's part of skill, but it's also part of patience. Well, and then in wildlife photography, we've had phenomenal subjects. Like had a fox on one Yellowstone in winter workshop, and it curled up to sleep, and it was beautiful light. And most of the clients got impatient. So, well, should we go look for something else? Well, A, the odds are we're not going to find something else, which we didn't. And B, you have a great subject and great light. Why would you leave that? Because you just want to capture more images? Again, I'm focusing on visually compelling images, not more images. So I think one of the least talked about, most important aspects of nature photography is patience. And that's exactly why it's in my formula. If you have great preparation and great skill, but no patience, and you multiply it by that, you're not getting better. Okay? Now, the final part of the formula, preparation plus skill times patience equals luck. Now, I hear a lot of people say, well, you must be lucky. Well, I've been in a situation where you got 8 photographers and only one of them captures the image. That is not really just luck. That's probably, were you ready for the proper exposure? Were you anticipating the shot? Were you looking at which side would produce the best shot? Did you recognize the behavior or sounds that would draw your attention to a particular subject? There are a lot of elements that go into luck. Yes, luck can be being in the right place at the right time, no doubt. But there are often many people in the right place at the right time, and many of them often don't capture a visually compelling image. So luck is often something that you do as much as where you are or where you're looking. And that's why I have it in the formula. I mean, there's no doubt I'm very blessed to get to travel to some of the destinations I go to. Some of you have been with me. Some of you haven't. Some of you may go. Some of you may not be able to afford to go. And I certainly recognize that. But most everybody lives within some relative distance of some great photography opportunities. You can go do macro in your own backyard if you have a healthy yard, not just a bunch of stinking Bermuda or St. Augustine grass. Well, those are all the different elements that go into my formula for nature photography success. This is foundational to everything I teach and everything I talk about. You can go back through all of my videos, and I guarantee you could take that topic and stick it in its proper place in that formula. The reason I wanted to do this video now is I really thought about doing it earlier on, but many of you follow me regularly, and I wanted you to kind of have an understanding of who I am, the kind of photographer I am, my passions for photography, the way I like to teach. And now I bet, looking back, this formula will make greater sense than if it was the very first video you watched. So thank you for being a part of my online community. I have quite a few workshops coming out. Hop over to the Wildside Nature Tours website or Precision Camera and Video to find the various workshops, classes. I do offer private online or in-person instruction. You can find that on my website at lehoyphotography.com. Thank you all so much. Your comments, I appreciate the compliments, the encouragement. Makes me really love getting to do what I do. Now, get out there, go capture some visually compelling images.